Our next speaker is a good friend of mine. Love clowning around this guy, I tell you. But I don't live as dangerously as he does, I have to tell you. This is a dangerous man. He lives a dangerous life. I don't know how he does it. And yet, you know, it's like danger, danger, danger. Oh, also erudite, brilliant, intellectual speech. You know, so that's what you're about to hear. I'm going to shorten his whole bio. He's the front man for the Backwards band, very famous a band. He's amazing. You heard him the other night. What I like most about him is his own personal bio is all about how the study of economics changed his life. Isn't that great? So I love that. I'm a geek, but I love people who say, "Oh yeah, my life changed when I studied economics." I mean, that just, for me, that's music. All right. So help me welcome the brilliant and interesting and forever dangerous Eric July.
How y'all doing? Y'all good? Y'all good? Y'all having a good time, right? It's all that matters. It's all that matters. First of all, can we get a big shout out to like the audio video visual team like with Anarchapulco? They do a fantastic job. And just because, you know, I tour the world and I deal with some pretty crappy sound guys, and they've been doing a great job throughout the entire conference. They held it down at the concert as well. So big shout out to them. And the cool thing about this conference, man, you know, Anarchapulco conference, whatever you want to call it, festival, if you will. I've had the luxury of playing here for the last, well, basically this is my third year here. And to see the growth from the first year I got here and then double the attendance. And then now we're here. To see that growth is such I don't know, it's just a fantastic thing. It's something to watch, to see those new faces every single year that come here that had no idea what this philosophy or freer society, what is that? They had no idea what any of those concepts were. Sometimes their friends sort of dragged them here, and now they're enjoying themselves. They understand what it is to work towards maybe a more freer society. Now, the cool thing about the coolest thing about this event is the different walks of life, if you will. You got people from all around the world that come here, right? Different reasons, different backgrounds, ethnicities, countries, yada, yada. They come from different areas, and they're sub-communities within this community, as in the community that's wanting to work towards, I guess, like I say, a more freer society. And the cool thing is that each person has obviously a different story, right, as far as what led them here. My story is not the same as these individuals in the front row. The person next to you probably has a completely different story as to what led them more so to this point. And it's cool considering that, because I get guys, you know, that'll come up to me. I'll be outside just hanging out, enjoying myself. Maybe 3 guys come, "Hey, it's Eric July. Can I have a picture? I love your band," yada, yada. Cool. And then I always see in the corner of my eye some guy, you know, nudging the person next to him like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I love that. I'm not saying, you know, that I'm knocking that or anything like that. I love that. It really speaks to the fact that, again, we have guys coming here from different sort of walks of life. And then you have people that strictly know me as an advocate. Those are the guys that are the most funny. And because they tend to be those people that completely like undershoot the fact that I'm a musician, right? The fact that I'm a band, I guess the stage that I'm at in my musical career. Hell, even at this event, I'm not gonna put anybody on blast or anything like that, but I get people that come up to me at this event and they're like, "Hey man, so you're a musician as well. What kind of music do you do?" I'm like, "Okay, I do metal. I do hardcore music." "Oh yeah, that's cool, man. My uncle's cousin's baby mama has some bar that they own in Wyoming. She hit them up to come play." And I'm like, they spent 5 minutes, right? Just 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes telling me, giving me all this like rookie sort of level advice about what it is that I should maybe, I guess, be trying to do. And I never interrupt them because I know that they're very well intended, you know, because obviously there's nothing that their baby mamas, uncles in Wyoming, they can't do anything for us. We have a booking agency. We've sold thousands of records. There's not a whole lot that they can do for us. But again, it's just going to highlight the fact that there's individuals that know me and my personal self, as well as members of my band from different things, because we have other things that we're sort of interested in. And that's what really brought us here. It's not just about the music. It's about a host of just really different things. And again, I'm not saying this sort of to brag or to boast or anything like that. The fact that we can just really be completely unaware of what the next person, man, woman, what have you, has a completely different walk of life. Again, I cannot stress enough how beautiful that is, because we all want the same thing, and of course, that's to work towards a more freer society. Which brings me, of course, to the point of the entire speech, and that is the expanding upon and utilizing culture. Now, when I say culture, sort of triggers the living hell out of a lot of libertarians. And that's because when you think libertarianism, you think a more individualist sort of philosophy. It's about self, and that is completely right. But when I use the word culture, I'm talking about it meaning basically the customary beliefs and social norms and the material traits of a particular social group. Now, some people flip out. They flip out at this idea, like, culture, what are you? You some sort of low-key status or something like that, just pearl clutching. And it really goes to show that they don't understand that a lot of this sort of, these approaches, these different cultures, these norms that we have are all voluntarily arrived. And that's sort of natural. It's going to happen post-government, pre-government. It doesn't really matter. People have things that they are, of course, interested in, and they're going to obviously gravitate towards people that maybe have those similar interests. Hell, some of your best friends you've met because you guys had a similar interest. You were the same basketball team, what have you, book club, I don't know, anything. That's where you met them in, and sort of coming together by way of some sort of subculture, that is. And every single individual, no matter who you are, you're part of some sort of subculture. And again, it's about these different walks of life. The comparison, if you've seen me talk before, I talk about this all the time, and how it's perfect because he just introduced me. Me and Jeffrey Tucker, we're really good friends. But I don't know if you know, him and I are like completely different people. We're completely different people. But again, when I say we're good friends, like we come to these events, we'll chat, we'll talk for hours on end about what it is that we're doing. I'm learning from him. He's learning from me. It's amazing when I get to just sit down and chat with Jeffrey. And again, we're completely different. I'm a casual guy. This is probably as formal as I get, in all honesty. I don't like wearing suits or anything like that. South Dallas, from Oak Cliff, Texas, like that's just who I am. And Jeffrey, he's nice, he's snazzy, always looking good. Kiss babies, all of that sort of stuff. That's his thing. You know what I mean? Like that's his thing. So speaking of Wyoming, like I said earlier, he can go to some maybe, I don't know, business conference and speak to a bunch of people about, freeing them from whatever shackles. But if my black ass walk up in there, like, hey, we're going to talk about, freeing you. And they're like, this guy, the security, get this guy up out of here. It's the same thing. If he comes maybe to my area, I link up with a lot of guys, I'm still connected with my inner city. And I link up with these guys. Could you imagine, we chat about what have you, and you imagine Jeffrey Tucker walking up in there like, hey, what's up? I'm like, get the hell up out of here, Jeffrey. But again, it's a beautiful thing. That's not those differences that he and I have, though we have the same thing that we're more so advocates of. That's a beautiful thing that should be embraced, because he's going to be able to reach people that I have no access to, and vice versa. So most of you guys, again, you connect with people because of some sort of cultural similarity. You grew up together, you linked up with each other because you enjoy the same thing, and believe it or not, that is very significant that you are able to positively really influence people's lives in that sort of realm. Now, I have guys with my band, for example. If you're not heavy into the metalcore scene, the hardcore scene, you would have no idea who we are, who Backwards is, or what we do if you're not into that. But I cannot count how many people that have come up to us after shows, hitting us in the inbox, and they say, man, I never knew what this philosophy was, what libertarianism was about, until I went and looked you guys up. And that's because, we were maybe the opening act for one of the touring, for the headlining act, obviously, and their fans came to libertarianism, or at least were introduced to the idea by way of us. We get that a lot, like very often. And again, that's just me sort of using that to break that communicative ice, right? I'm related. They like the music. That's why we take it very seriously. We always have good visuals. We always have good audio with our music. We don't have to tell anything that we do, and that's because we want to be that sort of that gateway drug, if you will, to people that want to learn more so about this. Because those kids, certainly that go to those shows, they would have never. What they know about libertarianism is what their favorite artist said about it, and it was more than likely a straw man. So it feels good to be able to hear those sort of, success stories. If I can plant a seed, I can perform in front of 100 people, 200 people, 500 people, thousands plus, depending on the tour. Like if I can perform in front of all of these guys and one person walks away from that show having learned something new, I feel personally that I won. And it's not just because of the lyrics, by the way. It's about the fact that we live what it is that we speak about. We talk about libertarianism, not just beating you over the head with it in our lyrics or anything like that. These guys see us, they look us up, and they're like, man, I saw your video and you were talking about this and talking about that, because we actually, it's not a gimmick. We genuinely believe in what it is that we're saying, and we want people to more so understand that. And this is why I get so tripped out when I hear people say things like, this person or that person is bad for the quote-unquote movement, or this person is the reason why they don't take us serious. I hear that all the time amongst libertarians. Oh, look at that person. That's why nobody wants to be a libertarian, and they point to this one person. This is such, at least to me, a bogus assessment. Though I'm not stupid. There will be people that will go around claiming to maybe be libertarian that will take illibertarian positions, and absolutely you should call those guys out to separate the real from the fake. And of course, there's nothing wrong with calling that out. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. But when we're talking about libertarianism as a whole, and we're talking about strategy, and your effectiveness and communication should not be so heavily reliant upon what somebody else is doing. But when you start talking about that sort of strategy, again, using myself as an example, using the band as an example, that's sort of what I use as my vehicle to spread libertarianism. There's people that don't like me. There's people that hate my stinking guts. There might be people here that hate my stinking guts, that genuinely dislike me, and that's okay. But it's not about agreeing on everything. It's not about being in unison on every single thing. I don't have any sort of monopoly on the libertarian movement or anything like that. I'm not stopping anybody from doing what it is that they want to do, whatever your medium is, whatever your vehicle of exchange is, do that. You know what I mean? But I will never impede on that. I might disagree with the strategy. I might say, hey man, you might want to adjust this and that, but I will never down talk somebody because they simply go through a different route, as opposed to me doing music, doing speaking, doing these videos or what have you. And I think the biggest criticism, if anything, that I get is, again, I rag too much on the left. If you see my Twitter, that's all I'm doing. And I'm pretty open about that. And that's considering the fact of how I grew up, though. I grew up leftist-dominated household, leftist-dominated family, and I mean statist leftism, as in making the entire state more so the nanny state. They want everybody living at the expense of the state. That's what I grew up on. So when you find that is a lie, of course, that's maybe something that you want to spend a lot of time sort of attacking, certainly because I see that as a big threat among my community, the communities that I grew up in, and that's something that I take very, very seriously. And you have to remember my sort of personal, I guess my background is sort of where I come up. I grew up gangbanging. I'm pretty open about that, red flags, doing all of that stuff, whoop-de-whoop. And that was something that I started at a very young age. Like, soon as I even before I was a teenager, I was doing that stuff. I was gangbanging, beefing on other black people for next to no reason, just because when you think about it, it's real status in a sense, because hey, this is our territory. This is what we claim. Our side of the hood is better than your side of the hood. So let's go fight. That's really what it ultimately boils down to. It's something stupid, but it's fundamental. People losing their lives and the communities are being terrorized just because of that approach. And it changed, for me at least, when I put somebody else in danger. I just told the story over at Bitcoin.com about the fact that I was a track and field athlete. That's actually what got me out of the hood. But I was a track and field athlete, and I was a senior year, still sort of banging. And my girlfriend was a basketball player, and we used to hang out just in the parking lot after I would get out of practice and stuff like that. Now, a car, probably 6 dudes deep, rolled up. I already knew what time it was. It wasn't nothing for me to get out there and start fighting, get jumped by 5, 6 dudes. That was just an expectation, another day in the books. But that was the first sort of time that I put somebody else, and that was my lady at the time, in grave danger for something that she had absolutely nothing to do with. She had nothing to do with it. And then it sort of clicked. And granted, I was still sort of a knucklehead, but I was being way more cautious and wanted to learn more so alternatives because I was just an angry young black kid. So track and field was what got me out. That was what got me out. I went to University of Memphis right out of high school on a track and field scholarship. And that's when I sort of went down that rabbit hole of economics. I wanted to learn about economics. I took this macroeconomics. Looking at it in retrospect, it was complete nonsense. But the fact that I was able to just learn what this subject was, this was an actual thing. I wanted to learn about economists. So I want to learn about the black economists. Again, this is sort of the construct. The white person could have been saying the same thing, and there was a lot of white people that were saying the same things as some of these guys that I'm about to mention, but because they weren't black, I wasn't trying to hear any of that. Again, it's that sort of that culture and that upbringing, and that's the nonsense that we was really grew up on. If we heard it from a white person, it's like, oh, that person is white, they don't have what's in your best interest. But then I came across the likes of course, Thomas Sowell and Dr. Walter E. Williams. And it changed my life. Both of those guys changed my life. And I got the opportunity to meet Dr. Walter Williams out in SMU and tell him he knew I existed, which I was surprised. And just got to tell him, hey man, you were a huge inspiration to me. And actually PBS, ironically, is doing a documentary on Thomas Sowell, and I got to speak on that. So even to be a part of that and show those guys what they meant to me was something, it's just very legitimate. However, you got to take into consideration what led me down that road. Had those guys not existed, it could have ended a completely different way. But again, I wanted to know about these black economists, and thankfully those guys existed. But it does show how important culture is, no matter how stupid you may think it is. And again, looking at it, in hindsight, yeah, it's a little stupid, but they existed. And again, one thing led to another, and I got to where I'm at. So now that we are enlightened, and I think that I'm enlightened, I think I got it at least somewhat figured out. I'm always learning, but I think I at least somewhat got things figured out. It's easy to try to place that sort of enlightenment on other people. You can see it, and it may be simple to you, but it's one thing to get other people to see it. Like, so it's another thing like, hey man, it's right here, it's in your face, but they might not see it. And again, that's when you have to think about maybe where it is that you come from before you became enlightened, before you were a person that wanted to work towards a more freer society. Again, had Thomas Sowell and Walter E. Williams not existed, it could have ended up a completely different way. And that leads me to my next point. Now, contrary to many people's beliefs, I'm not so far removed from my old lifestyle that I'm not like connected. I've been able to influence a lot of old friends, people that I actually grew up, gang banging with. And again, I take that very seriously. This is why I want to emphasize the fact that utilizing culture is not just like anti-individualism sort of approach. In fact, it's quite the complete opposite. This is why I take issue with some people that approach a lot of black people as if they have no sort of agency. Even fellow libertarians do that. They have no agency, no responsibility, no accountability or anything like that. We all, for example, in this room recognize the rotten and how dangerous the war on drugs is. And we all understand that this has negatively, for the most part, affected a lot of black communities, more so than, maybe other communities. But those that act like ending it would be, that's the solution, right? You end the war on drugs, the black community is just gonna prosper. That's it. Just end the war on drugs. That's why they live the way they are. That's why they are the way they are. That's why they act the way they act. They are speaking completely out of complete ignorance. There are people that are experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and many of those issues will still persist if you end the war on drugs. That's the harsh reality. Not every black person is on drugs. Not every black person slangs drugs, contrary to your, or not saying your beliefs, but a lot of people's beliefs. They signal to the war on drugs, like, oh, that's the reason why, again, they act. Using my own self for example, I grew up in a single-parent household. My father was not around. Mother did everything she could, worked multiple jobs. My father was not around. He was not into drugs. That wasn't the reason why he was around. I used to gangbang beefing on other black people. It wasn't about slanging drugs. It was because you were on the other side of the city. That was why. It had absolutely nothing to do with drugs. Granted, yeah, we were connected with people that were into that stuff, but it had nothing to do with that. And again, that's the harsh reality and why I say you shouldn't rob these people of their agency, because there are cops, we all know, that are terrorizing their communities, but there are also other black people that are terrorizing their communities, and I used to be one of them, of course. It doesn't have to really be one or the other when we talk about the state and the dangers of it. You can acknowledge the aggression of the state and also acknowledge the aggression of other individuals. That's because these are grown individuals that should be held accountable and responsible, of course, for their actions. And this is where I disagree in strategy with a lot of libertarians. The way I look at the state is that it's a territorial monopoly on use of force, violence, ultimate decision-making, and they are the biggest violators of private property rights. Because that's because it is inherently anti-private property rights, the mere existence of it. Some obviously violate it more than others, but it's not up for dispute. What makes a state is the fact that it does violate the private property rights of another person. But they aren't the only people, is the point that I'm trying to make. They aren't the only people that are using aggression on peaceful people. So there's no need to try to rid people of that sort of agency. And black folks, rightfully so, for example, they tend to be they're very skeptical of the government. They're very critical of the government, especially of police officers. And they rightfully should be when you consider slavery, black codes, Jim Crow laws, all the Supreme Court cases, the Plessy versus Ferguson's of the world, Dred Scott v. Sanford, all of those, and the precedent that they set. Yeah, if you're black, you should be skeptical of the state. But there's also the problem in the voting habits, the problem with the welfare statism, the glamorizing of violence that black people commit on other black people, black women being objectified, black men and their masculinity being seen as this negative thing, broken down families. There's a whole lot of dysfunction that will not go away when the drug war is sort of ended. And I don't say this to discourage outreach to those sort of communities. I say this to be realistic in that approach and utilizing of that culture. I feel like this is a battle more so of wits as opposed to might. When we say that the state exists as it does, it's because the general population obviously allows it to exist. If people didn't see it as a legitimate monopoly, it wouldn't exist as a legitimate monopoly. And this is why I hate the concept of the quote-unquote criminal justice reform, because all that does is reinforce this idea that, okay, we just hand them a new set of rules, even though they don't follow the ones that they have right now. They don't care about those because they have a badge, they have those positions. It's not about simply what they say or what they say you can do or what they say you can't do. It's the fact that it's not the state's decision to make. So how do we unlock these people's minds? And again, it's by utilizing what I've already said and that's culture. I have a lot of people that have come up to me already, and they're fellow musicians. They have aspirations. They want to sort of break through, sort of like my band did. And I always tell them, just go for it. I grew up rapping. That was what I did. I've always been public. I've always been out there, whether it be in a choir in church, whether it was I was doing some sort of music publicly, but rapping for the most, I was singing, but rapping for the most part was something that I took very serious. And worked on that, worked on my lyricism, and it wasn't until I got into college when I wanted to actually pursue doing more so metal, punk, hardcore music. Could you imagine my black self doing hardcore music in South Dallas? Nobody, like, seriously speaking, like people would knock me for the fact that I love and I enjoyed rock music, because my mother was introducing me to stuff. I thought, like, for example, Beastie Boys, I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever heard, because when I was young, I was like, oh man, these guys had this rock element in there. They're rapping with it as well. And that was something that I loved that, and I wanted to implement that. And when I got to, going into college, I was like, all right, let's actually do this. So I started doing covers. And stuff like on YouTube, and I joined my old band. And then I had those experiences in the industry. And then we got to where we at now, backwards a few years ago, we formed that, and it took off almost immediately because we had all of those experiences to really fall back on and say, you know what, we did it this way before, let's not do it this way. So we did it. We're unsigned. Everything was a self-release. We had a very successful, a lot of people that are in this room have that Veracity, that first album that we had dropped, and it did very good, but we just did it. It wasn't, a lot of people said that we couldn't do it. A lot of people, we had a target on our back, obviously, because we were open libertarians and a heavily statist genre, if you will, subculture, if you will, but we just did it. And it goes to show that there's actually a market for this stuff. People want to listen to this stuff, contrary to your beliefs. There's a market for us. Yes, there's a lot of people that will knock it, but there's a lot of people that want to hear that, because we tend to, our favorite musicians, we ain't got a lot of them are hardcore status. We all know that. They're hardcore status. Wouldn't we love to have some guys like ourselves making maybe that sort of music? Again, it's a market. We just existed, and a lot of people gravitated towards us. It was first about the music, but they gravitated towards us because they was like, man, I love hardcore music. I love metalcore music. You guys make that, but you also adopt the philosophy that it is that I adopt. And that's my personal growth, but you all are part of subcultures and cultures that I will never be able to affect. I've long accepted that, because that's unique to you. That's what makes you an individual, those sort of subcultures that you belong to. Using this as an example, do we have any like sports fans in here? We got some sports fans. I've met some of my closest friends at Mavericks games, hanging out talking about the Cowboys. I know a lot of people hate those guys, but talking about the Cowboys and stuff like that. Like, I've met some really cool people, and people that I've built lasting relationships with just because we've connected sort of in that realm. Same goes for the religious. I know a lot of people aren't religious, but there's a lot of Christians. Do we have any more Christians in here? I'm a Christian myself. We got a couple of Christians. There's a lot of Christians. I don't know why they knock us so much. There's a lot of Christian anarchists in the world. And I mean, who nailed Jesus to the cross? I mean, it's really easy for me, at least, to appeal to the Bible and say why people should definitely. It actually disgusts me that a lot of people have a lot of Christians have subbed, instead of God, instead of Jesus, it's the state. That's who they unfortunately worship. But that has been a means that I've been able to connect with people, again, growing up in the church and just chatting about this stuff. And just because we existed in the same subculture, before we even knew what the other liked, before we even knew what we disliked, we were all coming together in the church. I'm also a hardcore gamer. I'm a big-time gamer. I'm streaming and doing all that sort of stuff on Twitch. I've met a lot of cool people in that realm. Some of my closest buddies. That was how we kicked it. We wasn't the type to go out, drink, and smoke and do stuff like that. We'd kick it and play, NBA Live and stuff like that all day long, and literally for hours, and Halo and stuff like that for hours on in. And we met other people, like one of my other closest friends, DeMarcus. Like, I met him strictly because we would play Smash Brothers all the time. You know what I mean? And he lived across the street, and he liked Smash Brothers, so we played Smash Brothers. And now, again, that's a lasting relationship, and he's also a fellow libertarian. So it's like I'm meeting these individuals in different sectors just because I go out there and I've pursued what it is that a lot of people say that you really cannot do. It's the same thing. I rebooted. I've been streaming. I've been doing uploads on YouTube for about 10 years. Like, literally, I believe my first video on YouTube was like 2006. And I've been relaunching and rebooting my channel. And recently, if you know, I've started to get really into the comic realm. I've been a comic book geek all of my life. That was my getaway when I wasn't around fighting and stuff like that. I was reading comics of the worlds, and I've connected with so many people now because of that. Because I was just like, you know what? Why don't I just start doing maybe comic reviews? Why don't I get connected with some of these agencies? Why don't I write? Why don't I ghostwrite? Why don't I do things like that in that sort of realm? And again, I've met some great people. I've met some lovely people within that subculture just because what brought us together was the fact that we were into comics. So again, it's not about being in unison or anything like that. It's not about agreeing. It's not about, you can actually dislike the route that the person next to you is for sure going, but that person will be able to influence people that you otherwise would have no chance in touching. And that is not something that libertarians should stray away from. We should embrace that. That's a lovely thing. The fact that we're different and we all come from these different walks of life, that is a lovely, beautiful thing. If you simply start utilizing the tools that you have, I promise that you can influence people. People come up to me all the time. They come up to me here, again, not just about the music, but about the advocacy. They have people that they want to talk to. Hey, I sent this person your video. I sent my mother this video. My sister, their sister, my video, or something like that. How do I get them to come, think about where I'm coming from with this? And I say this all the time, that you personally are the person that can affect that person way more than I can. Just because that's your family. That's the person that you love. That's the person that you care about their thoughts. You care about their feelings. That's the reason why you want to maybe convert them. That is something that's on you. And you all, every person in this room is a part of some subculture. Now, the thing I think that frightens people a lot, and where people get tripped out, is the fact that some people are more known than others when it comes to maybe this advocacy. We have a lot of great guys that have been on the stage and they have a big influence. But that doesn't mean that you aren't necessary. That doesn't mean that you aren't needed. There's still individuals that they won't be able to touch that you will be able to touch, simply because you, again, belong to some sort of subculture, and that's something that you guys, that's your connection. That's how you have broken that communicative barrier, that communicative ice, just because you relate. So no matter if you spend your life and you convert only 3 people, or you convert 300 people, 3,000 people, it doesn't matter the number. You most definitely are necessary. You're necessary. You're needed. We need each and every individual in here to go just have a chat with. I ain't saying, and I wouldn't advise you to just start beating your head, your mother over the head with libertarianism. That's not maybe a good idea if you just go up to her and say, screw the roads or something like that. Like, there's other ways to go about it, but you can just plant a seed here. You can plant a seed there, and maybe it grows. They might not get it there. They may get it. I get people that hit me up all the time. But, hey, 3 months from now, a year from now, oh man, I remember that video you did, and it finally started thinking maybe they had their own experience with the state that was a negative experience. I mean, I get that a lot. I'm sure you guys get that a lot. That's when they wake up and smell the coffee. It's easy to be like, oh well, it never happened to me. It's not so bad. But then, a cop pulls them over and they abuse their power. Then it's like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with that. But they may refer to something that you had said a while back, and they're like, maybe I need to start thinking about this more critically. But again, that's that connection that you have with those individuals that other people simply cannot touch. I'm a musician. That's my thing. I'm into comics. That's my thing, but I'm not into, I don't know, swimming. I mean, right, so black of me, right? But I can swim like a dolphin. I can swim like a dolphin, don't get me wrong. I can swim. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that, like, that ain't my thing. You know, like I don't, you know, competitive swimming and I don't know, water polo and stuff. That's not my thing. But that might be someone else's thing. And they might have friends because of that. You know, I'm really into basketball. I'm always, you know, y'all see me on social media. I'm always talking trash about how I think I'm the best basketball player in the room, wherever I go. But that's my connection. You know what I mean? That's something that when then I meet with other people, we start talking about basketball. One thing leads to another. We build a relationship. We build a friendship. I slide on my music or something like that. Next thing you know, maybe a year down the line, they have come around and they have adopted libertarianism. Each and every individual can do that. It might not be to the greater scale that some other individuals can, but every single person, you know, can do that. So I'm going to end this early, but I will leave you guys with this. Whether you positively influence the lives, again, of 3 people or 300 people, you are needed, you are necessary, because you can reach people that, again, I'm going to reiterate it 50 times if I have to, that the next person simply cannot reach. So if you want to change the world for the better, we want to work towards a freer society, what you should do is just do what you do. And that is the subculture that you're a part of. Utilize that. That is how you positively change the lives of everybody. I do appreciate you. Thank you so much. Big shout out to Anarchapulco. And I'll be around. Come holler at me. I'll be around. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.